Hey Jace, how you doing?
Not bad. How are you doing?
Not too shabby.
Excellent. Your video is a little choppy. I'm not sure if it's me or you.
Mm, I just rebooted, which means I'm loading like 140 tabs right now. So,
Ah, okay. Hey, Steven.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
We're here. It's happening.
It's half the battle.
Yeah.
all right. Is there a new doc? It's not in the invite I have.
Yeah. Well, I'll paste it in the Slack.
Yeah, I see Steven already did that.
So he did. Thanks, Steven.
Hello, folks. Ihor's here.
Hello, Ihor.
Howdy.
Struggling with my jet lag after Google Next last week.
Yeah, that's hard. It's only like a 16-hour flight, Ihor. I don't know. I don't know why you're having jet lag.
It was like around 24 hours just
That is the worst.
to bring me back home.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We'll be wait for 2 more minutes and we're ready to start.
Okay.
Just let other people to join.
Looks like good attendance today. That's exciting.
That is really cool.
In the meantime, anyone who is part of the meeting, can you add your that you're attending to the sheet?
All right, so we're ready to start. Welcome everyone. Today is July 31st. It's our regular bi-weekly SIG PM meeting. And today we have a few items in the agenda since we haven't met last time. Our last meeting was around 4 weeks ago. I would ask Steven to start with the first open item because it's assigned to him.
Sure. All right. So I noticed that the Zoom links need to be updated. As Noah was mentioning, we don't actually have the one. We should be generating new Zoom links. I'm not sure if we are currently following the new moderation processes, but I have limited access to look around with that stuff. So, yeah, we should generate a new calendar, two, make sure the invites are not posted on the community calendars, make sure that the agenda is part of that invite. And yeah, so the old calendar is actually, I think it was part of Caleb's old calendar. So it belongs to CoreOS right now, and we don't want to go back into that whole process of having to figure out who has access to the calendar and how. So that should be just a Gmail owned account. Sorry for the noise in the background. There are a few meetings going around me. But yeah, that's that.
So I've done that for a number of SIGs already. I'm happy to help get that all coordinated, if that's useful.
Yeah, totally. So we have, so I think it's the case for SIG PM and SIG release. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, that would be great. So GS, you'll cover this item, right? So you'll create everything and an update. Perfect. All right, so the next item, the next group of items is about features process enhancements. So Jace, you're actually the next person about enhancement delivery management in the Kubernetes ecosystem. Yeah, Cap.
Yeah, so this is actually sort of a co thing with Steven. Essentially, we're trying to diff our two proposals and figure out if there's overlap and ways in which they can work together. This is something we've talked about in the SIG many times over the last year and a half now. And it's something that the features train sort of rolls along in the release, and it always feels like we're running behind it, trying to catch it. And basically, we need to at some point put our foot down and actually change the features process so it's less manual and handles some of the cases that we've run into over these last several releases. So this proposal that I posted is one that I developed quite some time ago. The proposal underneath is the one that Steven's working on currently. And so basically my hope is, and I think this is Steven's hope as well, is that we'll, as a group, review both of those and find out what overlaps happen, and maybe one of those becomes the de facto working document for the new process, and we sort of get them all aligned and working and have a discussion around that. I feel like that discussion probably merits at least a half an hour or more. Tell me if you disagree with that, Steven.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of how I imagine it as well. So the way I see your document, Jace, is kind of as overarching policy around the features improvement process, and mine for features triage via automation is kind of around what can we do on a functional level for a features lead, feature shadow, SIG PM, people who might have to actually manage the features repo as increments of KEPs, and how to kind of tie those two together and do triage on them. So
right. And my proposal is essentially to deprecate the features repo altogether. So it's those seem a bit of cross purposes. So we just need to figure out what we do there.
We probably may start with working on the roadmap. What should we do if we are really going to deprecate a features repo?
Agreed.
Because it's at the current moment it's an extremely important artifact in the release process. So I would say that if we will decide on complete deprecation of the features repo, it may take 2 or 3 releases at least. we can formally follow here the same deprecation policy that we have for the features in Kubernetes.
Yes.
So follow the same process for the repo itself.
Yeah, and I want to make absolutely sure that we're not deprecating part of it that's actually useful. So I want to make sure that whatever is useful in there, that we ensure that that is maintained and moved in a way that is navigable. The new method that I'm proposing is a little more distributed, but is easier to track electronically because it's tied together with labels and links to issues and all that. So it's just one of those things where we probably need a working session specifically on that. And I feel like Steve and I could probably do it, but I feel like in a way I'd rather have some more voices in that conversation just so we can have diversity of thought. Because I've been staring at it for over 1.5 years, 2 years now, and it feels like I probably am not able to be fully dispassionate about it. So I'd rather have somebody that can look at it with a clean slate and make sure that I'm not missing anything.
So sorry, is there a little bit more detail, Jace? What pieces we will keep, what pieces we want to deprecate, and what the new process will be?
Yeah, so the document outlines it, but essentially the idea is that the KEP becomes the record of note for what a feature is, and then issues per milestone are in the Kubernetes repo, and those tie back to the KEP. So basically you can look at all open issues for a particular milestone, and those will have, this is the work we're going to accomplish in, say, 1.12, and it'll have all the specific PRs that are associated with that will be listed in the issue. So essentially you put in PR for, yeah, I'm making this little tweak to make this feature thing work. Then it shows up in the issue and it shows up in the KEP. So literally you can go to a KEP and see exactly what per milestone is in every release. And that gives you a complete view of the feature lifecycle. Right now, there's no way to do that.
Yeah. Are people now following the KEP methodology?
It's starting to take hold. I need to do some serious PR work on behalf of the KEP and also fix a few pain points in terms of numbering and some other things. But it's starting to get traction. It's mature enough that I think we can start crafting our processes to be ready in 9 months or so to match that. So I think we're less far behind now than we were when I tried to do this, a year ago.
So it sounds like the features repo will still have the issues for every release. What are we then actually deprecating?
So the issues for each release would be in Kubernetes, and they wouldn't be in the features repo anymore. Because the trouble is that we have duplication of proposals. So essentially features issues are acting as surrogates for the proposal. So essentially this brings the issues directly in the same repository as the release. So there's no more looking at external repos to understand what work is being done.
So something to note there, I'll do the KEPs thing later, but so one of the problems that I see there is that we track things like cluster autoscaler in features as well, right? And they may not have a defined or easily visible process for us to follow. So I'm wondering if the features repo is still the right place to do it, and maybe we instead deprecate the idea of a kind feature within Kubernetes. I don't have a good answer, just kind of tossing things out there. From the KEPs perspective, I think that we specifically state that KEPs are not required to be adopted by SIGs, right? So before we seek KEP adoption, we probably have to say that they need to start being adopted in some way.
Yeah, well, KEPs do obviate the current proposals process. So currently, if somebody wants to come to the project with a proposal, if it's not a KEP, we're not going to review it in SIG architecture. So it's one of those things where it's a bit of a catch-22. So that's among the work that I need to do for SIG architecture is to get the KEP thing straightened out. Because Caleb was sort of on point to do that, and Caleb got pulled into other things, and so it's sort of been in this dangling, unowned state for a while, and I want to make sure that release, architecture, and PM are all on board with what KEPs are trying to do, because honestly, I think people struggle with what is a KEP even, what is it for? Why are we even bothering with this? It seems like a lot of overhead for not a lot of return. So I want to give tangible benefits for creating a KEP, and also make it clear to people why it's important to partake in that process. So, yeah.
Cool. So not to derail the conversation too much, but I'm noticing that we also have new faces in the group, so it'd be nice to maybe do some introductions, new people.
Sure.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, go ahead, Claire.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Claire Lawrence. I'm from Pivotal, and I work with our Kubernetes teams there, so PKS and then our open source contributors. And I was invited to this by Graham Seener.
Hi, everybody. I'm Livio Arleo. I'm with Samsung SDS. I head up our cluster ops and also our hybrid stack platform, and kind of learning the ropes here of what the product management team for Kubernetes is working on, so we can look at how it fits with our strategic needs.
Hi, I'm Vishal. I'm with Samsung SDS as well, working with Livio.
Hi, I'm Tim Pepper. I am on the release team at the moment, so I have an interest in how we track this and manage it. And obviously the timeline's longer, but like Jace and others having been through it, I feel the pains of the current process, and I'm keen to see improvement and contribute to improvement.
Welcome, everybody. That's wonderful to see new faces involved.
Thanks.
Agreed.
So in terms of going back to the proposals thing here, how do we move forward with this in a way that gets enough visibility and voices in the conversation? Should we carve out half an hour of our meeting next time and just start the conversation, or what does everybody prefer?
So, hey, Jace, we have time scheduled this week, I believe, Friday, maybe an hour or so.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
believe
sure.
you and I do. That's correct.
Do we want to open that up to people, or?
Sure.
Right? I'm easy.
I'm all for it. The time that we have on the calendar is in Pacific time, and it is, why is it not on this calendar?
So I think there's a set of requirements that whatever process we adopt needs to meet. Like one requirement is that the release team and the marketing team should be able to get a at-a-glance view of what is in the release. And not just those teams, but anybody who wants to get a sense of what's the backlog for the release, they should be able to get that. That's one requirement. I think the other requirement is that that there should be the ability for SIG members to create or list what their intentions are, and maybe the KEP is the way to do that. What their intentions are for a particular release, and then ongoing across releases. And I think maybe a third intention is to figure out if something isn't in the core Kubernetes repo, and right now there's a lot of other repos that are associated with the Kubernetes project that aren't the core Kubernetes repo, do we have a way to track that as a team and be able to follow its progress, and certainly, include that in the launch, in all of the blogs and in all of the marketing for the launch. I think those requirements we should capture somewhere, whatever the process ends up being.
Great. I just put those in the notes at the top of this discussion section. If you think of anything else, Aparna, that you'd like to add there, I'd love for you to fill out any more bullet points, because as somebody with a vast product management knowledge, and you've got that lens that you can apply to this, I would love to have that in there.
I would also say for the people that are on the call, I think getting traction around this is actually having people review the proposals. So if you can, when you have a chance, actually review both of our proposals. They're slightly different approaches, and they are some subset of all of the stuff that we're looking for. So definitely like read through them, comment, and we'll see how we can meet in the middle.
Great. Thank you, everyone who is adding to that list. That will make this much easier and better once you've reviewed it too. Did you want to move along, Ihor, to issues, PRs?
I had a quick agenda item, if it's possible, but probably no more than 5 minutes.
Go for it.
Ihor, if that's okay. I wanted, I think Ihor and
Yeah, it's
I.
okay.
Okay, thank you. I think we had done a presentation to the CNCF end user group, which was pretty useful. We kind of talked about some of the features in the next release, but we also talked about what was happening across the SIGs, and we got some feedback. It sort of got a discussion going with the end user group about what they liked about Kubernetes, and I found that very, very valuable. That resource is still out there, and I wondered if SIG PM would be more interested in engaging with the end user group, because I think they would value it. One of the ideas I had for that is maybe we can investigate, sort of what are the kinds of use cases that specific verticals have. So we could take the end user group and maybe target a subset of the end user group, let's say the healthcare vertical or the media vertical or the financial services vertical, and just have a session where we talk to them, and actually they talk to us about how they're using Kubernetes, what are the use cases that are most relevant today, and then what are they looking for in the future from Kubernetes, what are the untapped opportunities. I thought that might be a good way for us to engage with this, the pool of wealth that is the end user group, but also it would help us inform the roadmap and or future KEPs that could form the roadmap for Kubernetes.
So strong +1 to that. Just from a feature shadow perspective from last release, I noticed that there are quite a bit of CNCF activities that we don't necessarily, marketing activities and coordination that we don't necessarily bubble up or out to the upstream community that are also not really documented. So I'd love to add that to the mix, as well as, I mean, just based on the stuff that seems like it's in my purview for product management, cherry stuff, I would love to help take that on.
So a format that we could use, and we would need facilitation, of course, from Ihor and CNCF, but a format that we could use is that we could host, say, a verticals product management meeting with folks from the end user council. And the requirement to host it would be to make sure, whoever's hosting, to make sure that the right people attend, and then to produce a document at the end of it that captures a set of use cases and some learnings from the meeting, potentially some follow-ups as well. Actually, it could be a combination of kind of pre-work on existing use cases and existing case studies in a particular field, and then followed by, what was the learning from the meetup.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome.
I would also add that the CNCF end user community, exactly that one where we had a presentation with a partner a few months ago, has 2 slots where we may present. It's August 9th and October 11th. So if we'd like to use these slots with the CNCF end user community, we can do it.
Yeah, I think August.
It can be.
Well, I think we should take those. We need a repository where we can kind of take the feedback and just sort of, develop our output and share with the rest of the PM team, SIG PM.
We can certainly just put it in the community SIG PM directory. That's a reasonable place for it.
Okay. So if there's interest, we can pick a vertical or pick a use case or topic for the August 9th and another one for October.
Do we have an idea about what verticals are best represented in the end user community? Or do we have any hotspots of things, or is it just kind of a general industry mix?
I mean, you can take a look at it. It's open. All of the companies are listed on the CNCF website. If I remember, I think financial services is a big one.
Okay.
Retail is another one. You know, one thing, like if we were to do something next week, I would be interested in exploring use cases for edge computing, for Kubernetes. That kind of seems to come up a lot, but there's many more. I mean, there could be use cases for machine learning and analytics, use cases for containerizing things that are legacy applications, or we could just go for specific verticals and say, you know, how are financial services institutions using Kubernetes? Where is it useful? Where is it not useful? And what type of applications are you containerizing? Stephen, you mentioned some interest in this. Do you have any particular topic? I'd be interested in maybe putting together a questionnaire for the August 9th one.
So I will not be available August 9th, unfortunately, but I'd be happy to volunteer for the October 11th one.
Okay. And then would you have a topic that you'd like to cover in October?
I got to scratch my head on that one first.
Okay, I'll think through. Anyone else have a topic they'd like to cover with the end user council?
Could we do a general, just a call for pain point improvements? So like, for example, I was talking to somebody the other day and they're like, oh, we had trouble scaling to X number of thousands of nodes. Like, oh, okay, well, we can probably help you with that, or at least understand it better. So I'd love to understand things like scaling is a general issue, or installation problems, or those sorts of things, just to find out what people are struggling with.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think it tends to be like 45 minutes. So there's some sort of structure that you have to put in order to facilitate the meeting. But it can certainly be feedback about, you know, particular topic.
We might be able to facilitate hotspot conversation as well, like do some sort of voting thing, you know, just basically listing the top things, scalability, reliability, those key usability elements, and just let people do an online vote or something like that. So just to rank it, that might be a way to aggregate the input without having a lot of overhead.
Yeah. Would you like to run a kind of survey beforehand?
I'm wondering if we do that, or even real time, just if it's an easy to use way of doing it. I honestly, I don't know what that tool would be, or if it's even possible, but
I see.
I would have to give it a little thought.
Oh, we don't have a tool?
Probably do.
It'd probably be like a form.
We have a Google slide, Google Forms, right? So
Google Forms is probably
we did almost the same a few months ago, and CGAPS also did it for receive information from the end users. How do they run applications on top of Kubernetes? So I'd bet on Google Forms, and I can, if we'll decide on the content, and I can work on distributing that across our end users.
Yeah, well, we have the one, I think it's Kubernetes reports. That's the usabilities thing, I think. Let me look that up real quick. Kubernetes.
Igor, did you say that you are able to put together a survey for the August 9th end user council?
Right. I also have to mention, just a disclaimer, that I received the information about that. So August 9th can be booked at the current moment, because I've been checking this information around a week ago. But I just sent a request to Taylor, who is working for CNCF and scheduling the meetings, about if this slot is available. But October 11th should be definitely available.
Okay. I think that's cool. So, yeah, if you want to maybe create a document where we can input questions that we're interested in asking as a group?
We can do it.
You can actually
Yeah,
you can open it up to the community as well. It doesn't have to be just SIG PM.
Yeah, I agree.
I suggest sending it out and saying, hey, we're going to be running a survey. Are there specific questions? No guarantee that your question will get included. Like, it has to be a reasonable question, but do people have questions that they'd like to hear from end users?
That's wonderful. That would be great.
I like the Kubernetes user feedback that GS just shared in the chat.
Yeah.
So
Why
we
don't
can
you put that
use
in?
this form.
Yeah, put that in a doc, and then let's just circulate that with the community. I have some things I'd like to add. I like more numerical questions, so I'll add a few. I'm actually very interested in knowing what kind of stateful workloads people are running. I have some options I can put there. I'm interested in what kind of use cases they have, so I can put some options there. And then I'd like to know the size of their environments, how many pods, how many nodes, how many clusters. So those are 3 questions that I can add. And probably this group has other questions, and the community probably has even more. We might not want to run a very long survey. We'll probably, I'll leave it to you to maybe kind of hone it down, but we can give comments.
Yeah, we can also see if the one I've got, it kind of, you had recommended that before, and it has a thing that says how many nodes are in your organization and whatnot. So
okay,
we might be able to leverage existing prior art on this, so it's not so.
Yeah, because that's directly useful for scalability.
Oh, absolutely, and it also gives you an idea if somebody's facing pain points, at what scale. That makes a huge difference.
Right. So let's see. Then Ihor, let us know if we can run that survey. I think let's try and get it out the end of this week, so they have like a couple of days to respond.
Yep.
Awesome.
Otherwise, we can plan for October.
Otherwise, we can plan for October. We can always run this survey again as well. So, and then let us know. I would be interested in attending on August 9th if the time works out. But.
Perfect.
Thank you. That was my only topic. I do think we should make it a recurring thing. And I think the one thing we have to do as an output is to share a report. And so those of us who present should commit to writing a report and putting it in the SIG PM repo.
If someone is interested, apparently you can be also interested. As you may remember, we had also the similar session with Kubernetes, with the CNCF KCSP, the Kubernetes Certified Service Providers. Can we be interested in having the similar sessions, but with companies that are delivering products on top of Kubernetes? Because we may also have a few slots for the similar presentations at CNCF KCSP meetings that will happen in the nearest time.
I'm a big +1 to that, just as a Red Hatter who sells OpenShift. So I would love to hear more about use cases around service.
We've talked about some things in SIG release around provenance, for example, on build artifacts, and I would like to try to have that tied to actual operator needs there. So I see it in a similar vein to getting the user feedback on the project. It would be really informative there.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I only have time to participate in the EUS thing, the end user council thing for now, but I think in the future I'd be interested in the provider piece. I unfortunately have to drop, but thank you all, and I look forward to working with you, Ihor, for the next week.
Thanks, Aparna.
Later.
Yeah, thank you, Aparna.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go back to our agenda. I missed where we stopped. Yeah, so it's about issues and PRs, right?
So I slid one more in there around attendance and basically calling for members. So this is the first meeting that we've had in, I don't know, a month and some change. I know it was a heavy conference season and everything, but we should be striving to put the same importance around horizontal SIGs that we do for vertical SIGs. So I know, I don't know, I also don't know the shape of all of the SIG PM members. I know who the chairs are. I don't know who participates or is interested in participating day to day. So if we could find a way to get some information about that or call for members, that would be cool.
We can create a markdown file on GitHub, just similar as we did for the SIG representatives, but we have deprecated this this concept, so we can probably add a markdown file for the most active and regular attending members of SIG PM activities.
Cool.
Ihor, do you want to move on to issues, PRs, and flight?
Of course. So let's move on. Let's move on now. So there is an issue. There is an open issue that Steven has open on Kubernetes features repo. It's number 590 about tightened permissions on K features. It was mostly about the removing an extra access and extra permissions from some people who are not really involved into the SIG PM activities, and leaving only the SIG PM chairs and sub-project chairs together with the feature owners to keep these permissions.
So yeah, so
Steven, yeah, you would like to comment?
Yeah, so I opened this issue kind of around, kind of in the process of collating features for the new release. What I've noticed is that between the last two release cycles, and I'm sure you can comment on how this has been for you as well. It's kind of the wild west if in terms of who can edit milestones, who can edit labels. So I depend on the labels as well as certain the milestones as well as certain labels to determine what the status of a feature is, right? And this process has been painful enough that I wrote that proposal that we were talking about to add more labels that only certain people had access to. But for that to happen, we need to tighten the permissions on K features. So a lot of discussion came up around that, basically from feature maintainers, feature owners, milestone maintainers around, hey, well, if we don't have access to edit these features, how are we going to keep them up to date, right? So I'm not sure how many people have noticed, but the new features tracking spreadsheet has, everyone can view and comment, but not everyone can actually edit the tracking spreadsheet. That was done purposely because there was some accidental vandalism, moving things into certain statuses. So it's kind of an issue of control, who has access, or more so, do you know the process to do the right thing? So kind of to my proposal to Jace's proposal, better defining what the process is for maintaining tracking features, tracking keps, different things like that. A lot of the issues that are opened and listed here, that list is basically a list of all the open PM issues that I think are kind of exciting and warrant some discussion that aren't like typo fixes. So that's one of them. And I think it can be solved by one or both of our proposals. Two, there's the discussion of discouraging the use. Sorry, before I move on, did anyone have questions about that one? No, maybe so. Okay. So the second.
Can you comment on the upcoming steps if we'll decide? Well, we should decide that we should move forward. What are the technical steps to implement this?
So essentially, someone who has admin/owner access to the GitHub teams would be facilitating this. The people who have access to edit features right now are people who are either part of the Kubernetes maintainers GitHub team or the Kubernetes, I think the features maintainers team, and milestones, perhaps. I might be getting one of them wrong. But the problem there is we can't actually, so the time for consensus has passed on that one, but we're not at consensus based on the comments that I see. The problem there is that people do need to edit the descriptions of each of the tasks, make sure that we don't have automation in place to one, control milestones. We don't have the milestone bot enabled for that repo. We don't have access. We don't have the ability to arbitrarily add labels by automation just yet, or the right labels by automation. Some of that is fixed, but not all of it is in place. But the biggest issue really is being able to edit those features across milestones. So since we don't have a solution to that just yet, we can't really act on it unless someone has some magic bullet that I haven't thought of. Okay, I'll take that as a no. So the next one is about discouraging the use of our, at first it was named deprecate use of kind feature in the Kubernetes repo. The second I named it deprecate the use of kind feature, people were not pleased about it. So that issue also has some interesting comments around why would we do that? What's the value? And that kind of feeds back into, again, the proposals that Jason and I have up. The issue being, and Tim, you kind of feel this pain too, that at any one time, I think when I opened the issue, there were 607 open issues labeled kind feature in the Kubernetes repo. Right now, it's probably at 605, right? So not much difference. The problem that we have around that is that we have no succinct way of tracking those features. And if they're disambiguated from the features that are tracked in Kubernetes features, we don't know about them, right? So there's stuff getting into our releases that we don't have a handle on. So the idea there was to was essentially to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be filing a feature in Kubernetes, and file the feature in Kubernetes features instead. The problem that we have is, what about a new contributor? What about someone who is just a passerby who wants, who has a feature? And this is kind of around why I started writing that proposal. We have no easy means of triaging these features or moving them from kind of RFEs into something that's officially tracked by a SIG. So I don't see an easy solution there outside of implementing some process. Happy to take questions about that too. Come on, Tim.
Well, I have thoughts and comments, but I really think I need to read through your and Jace's proposals and kind of, I almost feel like to some extent the cart's a bit before the horse, since there's a couple of large proposals and these are implementation details. I mean, sure, they could be viewed as incremental fixes in the near term, but I'd like to weigh their merit relative to the longer term, especially if we're going to try and get some movement going on, which is, it seems like is the case here, align with one of those proposals and get, or combine the proposal or whatever the outcome is, but then not have process churn by making too many changes right now versus just deciding what the path is going to be and moving once in that direction.
Sounds good. Anybody else? All right. So the next one is around the KEP numbering being broken. So the way KEPs currently work is there is a template for KEPs. You fill out what your draft KEP will be. you increment, there is a next kept number counter that is stored in the repo. So basically when you file a KEP, you also bump that number. So the problem being if you have multiple KEPs in flight across different SIGs, not everyone's chattering about what the next KEP number is going to be. So as a result, you have KEPs that have the same numbers or KEPs that could have the same numbers. And the idea around that KEP numbering was to have something that's easily referenceable across multiple SIGs. So saying, okay, KEP 7 is the same KEP for everyone, right? So hey, go review KEP 7 means there's only one. So right now we can't necessarily do that because a lot of things are in flight. KEPs tend to hang out for a little bit before they're actually merged in. So Jason and I were talking about this a little bit, and one of the considerations was maybe, so what I mentioned on the ticket was maybe instead we tie KEPs to a date, but you lose that, hey, go to KEP 7, right? So that's one problem there. What Jason and I were kind of tossing around is maybe having the KEP tied to the number of the feature issue, the K features repo issue, right? So that would be unique, at least. But again, that's still in discussion, so happy to hear comments or suggestions around that.
I did put a link or a message in that issue, basically explaining what I think is a good strategy for this, which is to tie the SIG architecture tracking feature to, or the tracking issue to it. So essentially every KEP that goes through is getting tracked by SIG architecture because that's the owner of the KEP sub process or sub project or whatever you want to call it. So essentially since we're already creating issues, those issues have unique numbers and they can be tied across any project in any part of the org. So it seems like that would be a very logical enumeration. It's just to tie to the issue number. That would actually fix all the current problems.
Right. So Joe mentions, hey, Jace, do we think we need a tracking issue on the board? Not all KEPs will require SIG architecture to be involved. What about KEPs that are local to SIG? So, I mean, to your point, if everything is touched by SIG architecture, then there is value in having it being tied to the tracking board. So. Yeah,
it's already being done. So there shouldn't be, all KEPs have architectural implications by nature. So it's sort of one of those things that we're gonna follow it either way, and we're gonna create an issue to track it, and then that actually allows you to see where KEPs are in terms of their implementation status as well. So
I think that reinforces the idea that I at least have mentally, that a KEP is something bigger. If it's SIG internal, it's maybe not KEP level. There's feature work that gets to some level where you do want to have architectural discussions and broader implications might be present. And I feel like that's something that should just be a part of the definition of KEP.
That's what I was thinking as well. And also that we should change the process. So you basically start by creating a feature in SIG architecture tracking, and basically that becomes the first thing you do. So you get your number and then you fill out the KEP.
So I don't have my thought fully formed, but so in that case, we're tracking potentially. Are we going to be tracking across architecture, across community, across Kubernetes, and across K features? Like, what's the intention for the primary ingress point? Is that going to be architecture moving forward? Like, is that where we're going to decide?
I'm not sure I follow.
So right now we're logging KEPs in Kubernetes community, right? Mm-hmm. But we're tracking them on SIG architecture, this board somewhere, right? But also the increments of work are being tracked across K features, right? But there's also the question of the units of work that need to be folded up from Kubernetes somewhere, right? They need to be reflected either in the KEP or in the feature, or the feature to the KEP. Like it seems like it's becoming a messy chain. So again, this sounds like part of the discussion that will happen when we decide to have that discussion. So I think we just need to set time to do it.
Yeah, this is precisely why I wanted to tackle this almost 2 years ago, is because I saw this train coming and I've been trying to head it off for a very long time. And yeah, there has to be a steel thread across all the work. And so one of the core principles behind this effort is to do a separation of concerns. So basically you're not intermingling project tracking with the work necessary to complete the work. You know what I mean? So like if you're doing technical discussion around a KEP, like, oh yeah, we tried to do this thing, we need to do a design change because, you know, for example, like self-hosting for KubeADM became an issue that it wasn't architecturally feasible to do it a specific way. So that intermingling with, hey, we're not going to deliver this in this release, those become intermingled in a very bad way. So the idea is to simply say, here's the flow of all the things that happen in the life cycle from idea to implementation. And those will cross release boundaries. So that's why it's so important to have long-lasting issues that track that are not about the work. And that's one of the things that I have a concern with the features repo, is that it has a lot of the work in there as well. So it's just like one of those things where we need to figure out what we're trying to accomplish and go over it systemically.
One of the questions in that issue was whether there would be a separate repo, and I guess maybe a suggestion of whether that would be the features repo, but then there's the architecture one and the community one. Do you have a vision for where that stuff would congeal, or right now just sort of working on the abstract concept?
So to me, the KEP tracking happens in architecture because that we own that process. So that's the actual project management, product management, all that stuff feeds into that process. So those move across the board. Basically when the KEP has a workable increment of something that somebody can chip off and do. So essentially a KEP is not going to be a one-shot thing. It's going to be multiple PRs. It's going to be things like that. Those workable increments of activity are issues tracked in Kubernetes. And as the PRs are put in, they should reference each of those issues. So I look at a PR, any PR, and if it doesn't matter if it's labeled feature or not, if it links to the issue, that'll link to the KEP. Does that make sense? So at any glance, I should be able to pull up the issue that SIG node said, we're gonna chop off these 7 things, we're gonna do this release, and that's comprises this increment of delivery for the KEP. Then that should be viewable in the issue for that particular release. So that release will have that as a milestone, and that way you track everything that's delivered per KEP per milestone.
So currently, do you find people I know there's this concept of like implementable work within the KEP, where like we've gone through this process. Do you find people are actually starting to do that? Or, okay, all right.
Yeah, either implicitly or explicitly.
Cool.
Yeah, and some are being very deliberate about it. The work that happens in SIG cluster lifecycle, for example, is very deliberate and very incremental. Stuff in SIG node is a little more organic, but it's all planned. It's all being done in that way, but it's just not. There's no formal planning. It's just in a very piecemeal sort of way. So it is happening though.
That's awesome to hear, actually. All right, so last one from the issues side is there were some questions around what do we do with milestone maintainers, and maybe this is it's tagged as SIG PM as well as SIG release, but it's probably maybe more SIG release. So we don't really have a clear process of how to or when to add someone to milestone maintainers / remove them, who should have access to it for how long, whether it tracks across a release, whether it tracks across a set of releases, whether, so I tossed up some suggestions, whether it be, having release leads, which are the chairs plus the technical leads, and a set of delegates across SIGs to maintain the milestone maintainers group. We're kind of tossing it back and forth. So I didn't work on an edit. I'm kind of still digesting all of the thoughts around that PR. So if you all want to take a look at that, that'd be cool.
Thanks for all your work on this, Stephen.
We have 5 minutes left.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jace, for the thanks.
Yeah.
So we can kind of gunshot through some of the stuff that has happened since we last met, since it has been a while, and since not everyone has been on all of these calls. So if you just straight down the sheet, so Jace has been working on the product management methodology. I've seen lots of awesome work from from the perspective of like maintaining backlogs for SIG steering and putting up these putting up the backlogs for SIG architecture and maintaining the KEP process. So that's been awesome. We didn't have a process around how to be a features lead, so we have that now. So that's kind of SIG PM / SIG release team. I implemented just in addition to the Fedabot, which so features were getting marked as frozen. If a feature gets marked as rotten, it basically means people are not actively watching it. The feature owners are intended to be project managers across multiple release cycles for features. So the idea of a feature being frozen should never really happen. You should be updating your features. That kind of means you're not project managing them if that's happening. So Fedabot now will go into K features and unfreeze things that it notices are frozen. We deprecated the Kubernetes PM team, right? So the Kubernetes PM team was a team that had write access to a bunch of repos. We're moving away from direct write access to repos. So the Kubernetes PM GitHub team was removed. 2, all of the documentation around that across multiple repos was removed as well. This is way back in the past now. We've merged the SIG PM charter, which was kind of hanging around for a while. So that's awesome. People actually know what we do now. Around the K features repo, I've closed a bunch of the old milestones. I've closed the next milestone, which is a really horrible signal in terms of figuring out when a feature is planned for. So that's gone. Better clarification on the SIG PM representative. The idea of that no longer exists. So we clarified some of the notes on that. The SIG PM notes were lost at some point. We found them. The one note about me being the product management chair for SIG PM. So, hey.
Welcome, Steven, as our project chair. Someone has to say that. All right, so we have 2 minutes more. We have 2 minutes more for your final questions, if you have any. Otherwise, we'll close the meeting and meet in 2 weeks.
So just one note for the new members. You all have a unique opportunity to provide fresh eyes on a lot of the process. So I do encourage you to take some time, read through the proposals, read through some of these links that we've posted up, get an idea of what we're driving at, and definitely suggest means of improvement, because we want to get the train driving.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I plan on learning a little bit more about this and then helping where I can, but need a little time to catch up.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, take it easy, everyone.
Bye.
And so, bye.